Hey guys, this is GamerCow. Welcome to my first tutorial for Monster Hunter here. Now, I don't know how many of these I'm going to do because I don't know how many topics I can seriously do differently from a lot of other people, but I figured since I've been kind of investigating this stuff for my own purpose recently, I would go into gathering sets and what you can make at what rank and, look at the different skills and stuff that you can get for it. So, the thing with this game compared to Free Ultimate is that in Free Ultimate you actually had a really good gathering gear to begin with. You had the leather armour, and that had some really nice gathering skills. In this game you get the daring armour, which has mounting up and health up, which is not a bad alternative, but you definitely want to make the leather armour if you can. So, the actual gear itself is very simple to make. It just takes 1 pelt and iron, if I remember rightly, and you get Gathering +1 and Spirit's Whim for just equipping the gear itself. So that's pretty good. Gathering +1 gives you more mining and harvesting spots from mushrooms, from seeds, from everything pretty much. And Spirit's Whim, if you're using pickaxes for mining ore and bug nets for, catching the butterflies, they break less often when you have this skill, which is really good for the economy side of things at the beginning of the game. And that pretty much sums up what you are going to get from the very start. But you may notice there are 2 holes in here. If you are unfamiliar with Monster Hunter as a whole, they are slots for decorations, which will increase the skill capacity that you have. Basically, you add points into this complicated looking tree thing here, and you gain extra, skills and stuff for doing that. So, we're going to take a quick look at the decorations which are useful for gathering. And all of this stuff, there's more here than you'd be able to do at the beginning. You can't actually make decorations until you get to the second town, so you do have to do some offline stuff before you can get there. And when you can forge them, they will be from a separate person, but later on in the story you get the chief's daughter who can forge decorations as well. So, with that all said, let's go ahead and take a look at the decorations we're wanting here. We are looking for the Gathering Jewels for Gathering +2. Bulba Pumpkin, very easy to get hold of when you do some offline stuff. The Wycoon gives you these as a byproduct for multiplying items, so they're not too bad to get. And they are also needed for the Speed Gather Jewels, which you may wish to pick up as well. There's actually a specific armor piece that we shall look at that you can get speed gathering and, as a whole from, but they're still useful to have around in case you don't have that particular one. And then the Blessing Jewel, which just needs iron ore. So very easy to make. This will increase the power of the Whim skill, because skills do not always cap out at 10 points. You need 10 points as a minimum to activate them, but as we'll see later, we actually can get upgraded versions of most of these skills by getting level 2 or level 3 with 15 or even 20 points in skill. The final jewel that you may want to make later on in the game is the Charmer jewel here, but this is for a late game gathering set which we will look at later. But the Charmer skill is a very important one to have for farming that stuff, talismans and whatnot later. Speaking of talismans, we will get into those later as well, because there's a lot of talismans you can get for gathering which are really helpful. But when it comes to your early game gathering stuff, assuming you don't get a charm early on, this is one of the sets that I have here to show off. So this is basically just using some of those decorations that we had before to improve the power of the gathering that we had. So we still have Gathering +1, but with a 2-slot weapon, and I recommend the Kutku, the Yarn Kutku Greatsword here, because it's not too difficult to make, and it is one of the earliest weapons you can get that has 2 slots. So you usually will find the Kutku in expedition stuff that comes really early into the game, so you'll be able to make this pretty quickly. You can also fight Kutku with an event quest in the Gathering Hall, which will also lead to our next weapon of choice as well. but those 2 slots let us have 2 in the weapon and 1 in the armor, the headpiece here in my case. You can choose wherever you want for it, and that lets you get Divine Whim, which will basically be an improved version of the regular Spirit's Whim that we had before, so you don't break your stuff very easily at all. Again, really good economic skill at the start of the game because money can be a little bit tight and you don't want all of your bug nets and stuff breaking. This will allow you to invest into the mega pickaxes and the mega bug nets really early on, and you'll basically not have to worry about them being destroyed all the time, which is really good. We still have Gathering +1 because this set doesn't really have very many slots to work with, so we can only really get that. And Speed Gather is another thing which we have introduced to this set via the Iron Belt. So instead of the leather belt that we had before, or the whatever, like the tassets and stuff, we now have the Iron Belt because this, as well as having 1 slot, also has 10 points of Speed Gather straight up. That is its main ability. You do lose a couple of points of Whim. I think you lose 1 point of Whim and you lose 2 points, or 1 or 2 points of Gathering. So to compensate for that, actually no, you lose 3 points of Gathering here for not having the leather waist here. But decorations can compensate for that, and the Iron Belt itself does have 1 slot as well. So with the 1 slot on the leather gloves, the 1 on the Iron Belt, and then a 2 slot weapon, you have enough points to get the Divine Whim as well. If you don't have any slots on your weapon, then still get 1 Whim gem here because you can still have Spirit's Whim, and that would be just as, it would be not as good, but it would be better than nothing. So I highly recommend getting the Iron Belt as soon as possible when you can get a couple of decorations to balance out the lack of skills on the leather trousers, or the leather tasset thing you had before. So, with that said, this is probably your first gathering thing. In Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, the leather gear actually had Speed Gather on it as well, if I remember rightly, so it's kind of downgraded from before, but you can make up for it with this. Now, when you get slightly further in and you can get some very basic talisman stuff, you'll be able to get extra points into Gathering and Whim and stuff like that from there. And even at Rare 1 and Rare 2 from the very basic charms that you will get, it's not too difficult to find one that has something close to 10 points in Gathering. So here we have a different thing using... You could use a 2-slot weapon for this if you have a good enough charm. You need at least 8 points in Gathering to use this particular set. So I just want to go over the weapon here real quick. The Emperor's Speech is actually an event item that you get from a DLC quest that is the Tale of Poogie, and that is to capture a Yan Kutku. It does take a fair few of its rare giant beak to make. It takes about 3 of them, so it may take you a while to actually get this particular weapon, but this is the earliest example of a 3-slot weapon I could find. There was a great sword that is rare 3 that you may be able to use instead, but this was the earliest thing that I could see, and is probably one of the easier ones to make as well, so worth getting hold of this. So if you have a Talisman of My Strength, you could use a 2-slot weapon. This is at least 9 points of Gathering on your charm would let you get get this set with only a 2-slot weapon. So you could use the same one that we made before and it would be perfectly fine. However, this is only a Rare 2 talisman. The lowest grade talismans you can get are Rare 1 and Rare 2 from the Rook talismans, and they are very easy to get hold of. They are sort of HR2, HR3 type level, and even from those you're able to get stuff like Gathering +10 or Whim plus high numbers. So take your time with that. You'll probably find that with the way skills and stuff work, you're more likely to get Gathering skills and similar things to that at the early grades. So You shouldn't have too much trouble getting one of these, but if you can, then you can see we've gone all the way to 20 points of gathering, which lets us get Gathering God. And that will massively increase the number of items you can get. You basically almost always get the most amount of items possible from every gathering spot. You don't always get the same number of items from them. Sometimes you only get 2 mines out of a 2 to 5 mining spot, or 2 to 4, 2 to 5, something around about there. But this skill basically means you're much more likely to get that 4 or 5 mark than the 2. So try and invest in this skill if you can. Once again, Speed Gather just helps. It's not essential, but some mining spots and other harvesting areas will disappear after 2 or 3 minutes of the quest starting, so you want to get to them as quickly as possible, and once you're there you want to pick them up as quickly as possible. So Speed Gather is definitely something for that. So that will tide you over for most of... Yeah, you could use that for most of the game, to be completely honest, but if you want a little bit more defense to survive, or to not end up taking tons of damage from the lower level monsters in high rank, then you can actually make the high rank leather gear instead, and it works out quite well. So this is one of the few times where we aren't going to use the iron belts, because it does actually have Speed Gather on it, the leather gear. But we shall quickly take a look at this. This particular set doesn't need any weapon decoration, any weapon slots, because I have a really good wind talisman. The catch with the leather gear is that you get 13 points of gathering to begin with, so you can see with 4 decorations in the gear itself we have 21 points here. We also get 4 slots instead of 2 slots on the gear itself, but the gear has no whim attached to it, so there's no scope for reducing the chances of your pickaxes and bug nets breaking. You can, at this point in the game, you're probably at a good enough money state where you don't need this, but my talisman here is super good for it. It's Whim plus 13 with 1 slot, so that lets me get Divine Whim at any point. The 3 slots on the weapon do give 6 points of Whim, so if you have a Gathering Jewel, then with, say, Gathering plus 7 1 slot, or Whim plus 7 1 slot, something like that, then you could use, it would have to be Whim plus 9. No, Whim plus 7 1 slot would work, because then you've got the Whim plus 9 basically on your charm, and you could use that with 6 points in your weapon here, and you'd be able to still get Divine Whim. Don't worry too much if you don't have something this way, but it's something to look out for. You can still get Gathering God really easily, which is probably better if you haven't gotten any Gathering Charms yet, and you could just take both Iron and Mega Pickaxes into your Harvestors, and you would be able to still get all of the spots and it would be perfectly fine. But this gear has a little bit more defense. It's got more defense than it should here because I've actually upgraded it a little bit to level 7 here. It starts with about 21 defense, but armor spheres can be used, and those you mine to upgrade the defense of your gear. You should be getting those anyway, which is basically why gathering is so important, because you get the materials to upgrade your gear beyond the level that it normally starts at, so you take less damage. So with that said, that is essentially your go-to gathering gear for most of the rest of the game, but there are other sets that you can look at once you have access to expeditions and guild quests, and therefore relic gear as well. So for the longest time I used this set with packrat as a skill, and packrat is one of those new combine skills that you get from gathering relic gear. They have stuff like readiness or edgelore or other associated skills. Some of the game's armors do have them as well, but hoarding is not one of those. So what packrat does is it combines 2 skills together. One skill is gathering +1 and the other is charm collector. We haven't talked about that yet, but basically the charmer skill will let you gather more charms sometimes when you mine them. So you have a chance of mining 2 charms instead of 1 from your anytime that you mine or gather from an explorer spot. You don't have to mine them specifically. Anytime that you get a charm from the any gathering point, it has a chance of becoming 2 charms instead, and you will get a ×2 notification of that in this game. But it's a very expensive skill to gem in, because it takes 1 slot for 1 point of the skill, and it goes up to 20 points required. That's really hard to get until the end of G rank, so basically instead of that we have a weaker version of the skill that still does some work, and this has still been very good for me, and right until very recently for gathering stuff. So it only combines the level 1 versions of the skill, so you may not get as many gathering points anymore, but you don't have to worry about getting Charm Guard on your set, which is stupid hard to do. Talismans go up to, I think, 10 points is the highest I've had so far. You may be able to get 13 or 14, I haven't seen, but it's really hard to get. You would need, even with my 10-point charm, I would need 10 decoration slots for that, and that's hard to do. So this is something I would recommend instead. So I have 2 pieces of gear which have hoarding on them. They both have 6 points, but one of them could have just had 4 points, so they'd be fine. This is just what I happen to get from completing guild quest stuff. Relic gear is a separate topic in its own right, and we may go into that in a future thing if people want me to, but suffice it to say that my weapon and my gloves here have got their own inbuilt decorations that cannot be removed, so they give me the skill we've just talked about there. And then the rest of it is kind of still building to the same stuff. The iron belt is still extremely useful because it gives you speed gather without having to do anything. My charm gives me win without having to do anything, so I already had all the stuff I needed. I had the gathering, I had charm collecting, I had whim, and I had speed gather. So I had a ton of potential space left for new things, and what I did instead of I didn't really have much else to go for because I couldn't get gathering and hoarding because they don't stack with each other. So what I did instead is I actually built my set for Marathon Runner. This is the stamina skill, and what this does is it lets you basically half the rate that your stamina depletes when you're running. Now, as I'll go into in the next video, this is really handy for going around the Nighttime Dunes Harvestor in G rank especially, because you can collect all of the mining spots without any of them disappearing on you if you know which ones to look for. And that maximizes the number of armor spheres that you could pick up, which is the whole point of gathering in G rank, because if you want charms in G rank, there's a quicker way of doing that. And we may go into that in a different video as well. But suffice it to say, you'll be doing a lot of running around in the map to gather all the mining spots up, and Marathon Runner helps. It's not essential, but because I didn't have any other need to get gathering or charm collecting or anything like that done because they were already in my skill set, I decided I would get this instead. To do that, I needed 2 free slot pieces of armor and 2 1 slots. The 1 slot on the iron belt helps out, so the helmet just needed to be a 1 slot. I just happen to have the Chameleos one because it has the highest defense out of all the stuff I have. It's not essential to be that. It can be anything that you want so long as it has 1 slot. And then the chakra items are actually kind of cool for this as well, because they give you very low defense and no other skills on them, but they always have 3 slots, so you can put in these expensive stamina level 3 jewels and you can get Marathon Runner that way. I'm sure there's armor that you could make which has the stamina skill, but I didn't want to make new gear for stuff here because it wasn't really going to be used for anything else, so there we go. However, I've kind of been dancing around the whole charm collecting thing here, and there are other skills that you can use to help with that. You can actually get a piece of armor from the arena quest stuff at the very end of the game called the Feline Hairband, and this piece of equipment has 13 points of the Charmer skill. Now, as I've said, the Charmer skill goes up to 20 points, so you kind of do need still to have a good amount of stuff for that, but 7 slots is a lot easier to work with than the previous thing of 20 slots, or 10 slots if you had a plus 10 charm, so this works out quite well. Now, I do have charms that I think I have Charmer plus 8 with 3 slots that I could have used here instead, and that would have given me the skill, and I could have just used the remaining slots for Whim and stuff like that. But because I have that plus 13 Whim charm here, I decided I would actually just go ahead and make the set, and with that talisman, and just gem in Charm God from there. It did unfortunately limit my gathering to plus 2 only, because it's kind of hard to make a G rank version, or any version really, of the set that has Charm God as well as Gather God and Divine Whim and Speed Gather. It just doesn't tend to work very well together. So I have any 3 slot weapon. The Metal Mauler just is a relic gear that just happens to have 3 slots, so that works out quite well. And then the other stuff here that is not Feline Hairband we've discussed, the Iron Belt we've discussed, the Hawk Suit and stuff like that. I think it's called the Lecturer's gear when you are a female player, but this is basically the Caravanier's armor, and you get that by completing the Darren Moran offline stuff for HR10. Basically, when you get to G3, I think you get the opportunity, if you've done all the offline stuff, to fight Darren Moran, and it's an urgent quest, and when you're done with that, you get the ability to make this stuff. Might be wrong on that, but that's how I remember it going. So this is a very much an end game gathering gear here, but you get the ability to mine multiple charms, and this works really well. I tend to find this is a 50 to 60% chance of activating, which is ridiculously good, for gathering everything up. At this point, however, you're probably just going to be charm farming for the most part, but if you do need armor spheres as well, which the next video will go over, then this is pretty much the best gathering gear that I could make. It doesn't have the Marathon Runner, but like I said, that's more of a perk rather than necessary and a necessity, so I personally think this works out really well. So there is my be-all and end-all set for going on Harvest Tours. It is not the same as my charm farming set, but we will go into that when I discuss the actual process of charm farming and how best to do that. So I realize there's probably just a whole load of going into the sets and everything that you can make, and maybe just a whole bunch of complicated numbers, but it's really not that difficult to work with. You just need to remember that you need 3 or 4 particular skills. You need Gathering, you need Whim, and you need Speed Gather. And then later in the game you need Charmer, but that's for much later on. Basically, if you can make any of the sets that we have made here, then gathering materials will be a lot easier. Obviously, do not use these for doing actual hunts, because your skills are not meant for fighting stuff, they are meant for collecting things. There's a reason why you make multiple armors and you do the equipment set stuff in there, and it's all good. But with that said, next time we'll go into how I actually go about using the gathering stuff in G rank especially. You can do it at high rank as well, but I'll show my route for the Nighttime Dunes to get heavy armor spheres in G rank stuff, because that has been the most efficient way I have found of getting those particular orbs, and they are very useful for upgrading your gear. You kind of need a lot of them, so you may as well know how to do it properly. Till then, this has been GamerCow, showing off my gathering gear in Monster Hunter, and until next time, take care.